where we are going to be looking at a list of customers and comparing them alphabetically. And if the names are the exact same, we need to look at their ID numbers. This is going to dive in part A to string methods, and in particular we're going to be looking at the string method compareTo. So I'm going to have a refresher on that in the video, and we'll also look at how we can construct an if-else statement to take into account their ID numbers if the customer's names are the same. To this problem. Number 3 says, consider the following incomplete class that stores information about a customer, which includes two things. It includes their name and it includes a unique ID. To facilitate sorting, customers are already ordered alphabetically by name, and if they have the same name, they need to be ordered by ID number. This is where this differs a little bit from the compareTo method that we've used, because compareTo only looks at strings. In this case, the strings may be the same, but we need to also order them by the ID number. It says a particular customer is greater than another customer if they appear later in the ordering than the other customer. And we actually see this with the compareTo method. Here I provided some notes refreshing us on the compareTo method. It takes a string parameter, and similarly, it will return a positive value if the current string is greater than the other string alphabetically. Here's an example of that. Let's say the current string is Smith, and I want to compare that to Anderson. Because Smith comes after Anderson, that would yield a positive integer when I run the compareTo method on it. Now they've also provided us some sample runs of this. In part A, we need to write compare customer, and it says the compare customer should compare customer to another customer called other. And if it says the two customers are the same, then they should be ordered by ID. Otherwise, it should return a positive integer if the current customer is greater than the other, a negative if they are less than the other, or 0 if they're the same. That sounds a heck of a lot like the compareTo method, but we also now have to take into account what if the names are the same. Well, we need to look at their ID numbers. A couple other notes here. They have given us methods for getting the ID. We see that here. They've given us a method for getting their name as well. We've got a constructor up here, and then down below here we see exactly what we are tasked with writing. So we know that we need to use this compareTo method, and I think that's probably the most difficult part of this problem is how do I use compareTo? Because compareTo almost does exactly what the problem is asking us to do. It's just that we also need to take into account what if the names are the same. So the first line of code is written for us. Public this method has a return type of integer. Compare customer, it takes in a parameter of other. So I know a couple of things just from reading that very first line of code. I know that I need to have the keyword return because this method has a return type of int. And I know that I'm going to need to also at some point use the parameter other. And so let's consider that the names are not the exact same. So if they're not the same, then I can just use the compareTo method. So let's go ahead and create an integer called compare. And I want to set this equal to get name. I want to get the name of the current customer, and I want to compare it to the other customer. But don't forget, we need to call that using other.getName. And so we have that integer now. Now, if the names are not the same, then we're good to go because we've used the compareTo method, which describes here, makes it very clear that this fits exactly what the problem is asking us to do. So if that's the case, I can simply return compare. If the names are not the same. So if compare does not equal 0, then I can return compare. Now we have to consider otherwise. if their names are the same. And I'm going to leave this part especially up to you to code right here. But I will tell you that if the names are the same, which is what you see here when they call it on C1 and C3, this one is going to compare Smith 1001 to Smith 1003. And because the current comes before the other, in this case, it returns a negative integer. So you need to consider in this problem here, we know that we need to return an integer. In the event that the customers' names are the same, we need to be looking at their IDs. And that's what we need to return. So I'm going to leave that line of code up to you. This one walked you through quite a bit of the problem, but consider now, if the names are the same, how are we going to kind of deviate from this regular compareTo method and consider their IDs?